My sister's bet made me a beauty queen. I always knew something was missing, but I could never quite put my finger on it. It wasn't like I was miserable, but life always felt like it was running in the background, like a song playing faintly just out of reach. At 22, I should have had it all figured out, but I was stuck, bouncing between a dull office job I didn't care about and a social life that seemed to revolve around the same small circle of friends, week after week. I told myself I was content. I told myself that the steady routine of work and watching Netflix in the evenings was fine. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. It's not that I had any grand aspirations. I never wanted to be famous or rich. But I wanted something more, something real. I wanted to feel like I mattered, like I was seen in a way that went beyond the normal day-to-day. I wanted to feel beautiful. But beauty was something that always felt out of reach. I had never been the most confident person, especially not around the people who had it all. The perfect bodies, the sharp clothes, the way they could just walk into a room and immediately command attention. I wasn't one of them. I was just me. I wasn't ugly by any means, but I was plain. I had short brown hair that never seemed to do much, average height, a bit of a pudgy stomach I couldn't get rid of no matter how hard I tried. I could never get the hang of makeup, and my wardrobe was an endless cycle of jeans and oversized sweaters. I sometimes wondered what it would be like to have that effortless confidence, to walk into a room and not feel like I was fading into the background. But it felt like a dream, something far away that I could never reach. I was used to being overlooked. But what stung the most was when people didn't even bother to look at me. Really look. It wasn't like I wanted to be the center of attention, but I wanted to feel like I had something to offer. I wanted someone to see me, not just the girl who always sat in the corner, not just the quiet one who smiled politely but never truly participated. I wanted to be something more than the girl people thought they already understood. That's where I was, stuck between the life I had and the one I imagined. It wasn't a bad life. It wasn't even a sad life. But I could never shake the feeling that I was meant for something different. Something that felt more vibrant, more alive. But I couldn't find the courage to take the first step, to figure out what that something was. Until one day when my sister, Lucy, came up with a challenge that would change everything. It was an ordinary Saturday afternoon when it happened. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, as usual, when Lucy, my older sister, stormed into the living room. She had that look on her face, like she had just figured something out and it was about to be her new project. "You, my dear sister, are going to enter a beauty pageant," she declared, hands on her hips, as if she were announcing the next world-changing event. I stared at her blankly. "What?" "You heard me. A beauty pageant. You need this." She leaned over, dropping a flyer onto my lap. It was for a local beauty contest in our town, and my first reaction was to laugh. "I'm serious," she added, her eyes gleaming with mischief. I glanced down at the flyer, scanning it quickly. It was your typical small-town competition. The winner would get a crown, some cash, and a little local fame. Nothing too crazy. But it seemed ridiculous to me. I mean me, a beauty queen? The girl who couldn't even figure out how to do her makeup without looking like a raccoon? I shook my head. "No way, Lucy. I'm not exactly pageant material." Lucy scoffed. "That's the whole point. You need to stop selling yourself short. Look at you. You've got potential. You just don't know it yet. You're not that different from those girls on the posters, you know. You've got the right face, the right figure. You just need the right confidence. And I'm gonna help you find it." I felt a mix of surprise and something else, something like a flicker of excitement, maybe, or curiosity. "Confidence?" I echoed, my voice skeptical. "Are you serious? I'm not exactly the type of person who shows up in front of a crowd and rocks a gown." Lucy grinned, her eyes practically sparkling. "Exactly. That's why you need this. It's time to break out of your shell, sis. You're going to see yourself in a whole new way. Trust me, it'll be fun." I stood there, torn between disbelief and a strange pull of intrigue. Part of me wanted to tell her she was insane, but another part, one I'd been ignoring for years, felt a glimmer of hope. Could this be the thing that changed everything? Could I really take a leap like this? "You know what?" I said finally, my voice steady but unsure. "Fine. I'll do it." but you're going to help me every step of the way. I'm not doing this alone. Lucy's face lit up.
Deal.
The first few days after I agreed to Lucy's challenge were a whirlwind. It was like stepping into a completely new world, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I kept asking myself why I had said yes. The doubt gnawed at me. Had I really just volunteered to make a fool of myself? I wasn't the type to put myself out there. The idea of being judged, of standing up in front of a crowd, of competing against all those perfect, put-together girls, it felt impossible. But then there was Lucy. She was relentless in her enthusiasm, and a part of me couldn't help but be swept up in her excitement. Every day, she'd pick me up for practice, which always felt like a mix between boot camp and a makeover montage in one of those cheesy movies. First things first, we need to work on your posture, she declared one morning, standing in front of me with her hands on her hips, assessing my stance like I was a prize horse. Beauty queens walk with confidence. They don't slouch around like they're hiding from the world. I tried to straighten up, but it felt awkward, like I was trying to hold myself in a position that didn't quite fit. Like this? I asked, twisting my body in an exaggerated attempt to mimic what I thought was the perfect pageant walk. Lucy burst out laughing, her hands immediately flying to her mouth as if trying to hide her amusement. Almost. But let's work on that tomorrow. Her laughter was lighthearted, not mocking, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I wasn't being judged. I could see that she truly believed in me, and that belief made me want to try harder. It wasn't just about walking or learning to smile with perfect teeth. Lucy had me start practicing my answers, for when the judges would inevitably ask questions. What makes you special? What's your greatest achievement? The questions seemed simple enough, but when I sat in front of the mirror, trying to craft a response that didn't sound like I was reading from a textbook, I felt like a complete fraud. But the more I practiced, the more I realized something. Lucy wasn't just helping me rehearse a script, she was helping me find the pieces of myself that I had been ignoring. There were little moments of clarity when I said something in front of the mirror that I didn't even know I had been thinking. It was like I was peeling back layers of myself, realizing that I wasn't as invisible as I'd always felt. I had something to say, something worth listening to. Still, I struggled. I'd stare at myself in the mirror for hours, trying on different outfits, asking myself who I was supposed to be for this competition. Should I go for the glamorous, perfect pageant queen? Or should I try something more unique, more me? Each dress I put on made me feel like a stranger. I didn't recognize the reflection looking back at me. The person in the mirror was confident, poised, and perfect. She wasn't me. Lucy, I don't think I can do this, I said one afternoon, sitting on the edge of my bed in a bright pink gown that made me feel like a doll. I stared at the sequins, my fingers tugging at the fabric nervously. I don't look like them. I don't feel like them. I don't think I belong in this world. Lucy sat down beside me, her face softening as she looked at me. You don't have to look like anyone else. You're not here to be a carbon copy of those other girls. You're here to be yourself, but with the confidence to own it. Beauty queens aren't just pretty faces. They have to believe in themselves before anyone else will. You've got the potential to do this, I know you do. Her words settled over me like a comforting blanket. Maybe I didn't have to be someone else. Maybe it wasn't about fitting into a mold, but about reshaping how I saw myself. For the first time, I wasn't just following a script. I was creating my own. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, this time with no dress and no makeup, just me. I stared at myself, really stared. I could see the little spark of something in my eyes, the subtle curve of my jaw, the way my lips naturally curled into a soft smile. I looked okay. Maybe not pageant perfect, but maybe that was okay too. I took a deep breath, straightened my posture, and whispered to my reflection, I can do this. And for the first time, I believed it. The next few days passed in a blur of rehearsals and late-night makeup trials. Lucy guided me through each step, but I started to feel the shifts happening inside me, shifts that weren't just about learning to walk with grace or speak with conviction. I was changing. Slowly but surely, I was shedding my self-doubt like an old skin, and underneath, something new was starting to emerge. I wasn't just practicing for a pageant anymore. I was starting to discover who I really was, someone with the courage to step into the spotlight, flaws and all. And that realization made every minute of the struggle feel worth it. As the beauty pageant drew closer, the excitement I had been trying to harness quickly began to dissolve into anxiety. The excitement of the new challenge was being replaced by the familiar weight of self-doubt. With each day, it became harder to convince myself that I could actually pull this off. The pressure was building, not just from Lucy and the expectations she had for me, but from the world outside. I was already feeling vulnerable, and now, it seemed like everyone around me was watching, waiting for me to fail. It started with the comments. At school, it wasn't enough that I was suddenly practicing pageant walks in the halls, or spending more time on my makeup. No, that wasn't enough to keep the whispers from spreading. I heard it every time I passed a group of girls in the cafeteria, the snickers behind my back, the mocking whispers. "Did you hear she's entering that beauty contest?" one of them said, and I could practically feel the judgment in their words.
"She'll never win."
Another voice chimed in. "It's so embarrassing. She's not even that pretty. What's she thinking?" The words stung, more than I wanted to admit. It felt like everyone knew what I was doing and was waiting for me to fail. I wanted to hide, to crawl back into my shell, to forget all about the bet Lucy had made. But I couldn't. Not with Lucy so determined. And not after everything she'd done to help me get this far. So I pressed on, trying to ignore the voices and focusing on the next task. But the more I heard those whispers, the more I began to question myself.
What if they were right?
The physical toll also started to take its toll. I had never worn heels for more than a few minutes at a time, but now I was forced to practice walking in them for hours each day. My legs ached, and my feet were blistered, but Lucy would push me to keep going. "You have to own it," she would tell me, as I stumbled and teetered, my confidence faltering with each misstep. "No one's going to believe in you if you don't believe in yourself." She was right, but it was easier said than done. The image I had built in my head of a confident, graceful beauty queen was far from the reality. My feet constantly fought against the heels, my posture was never quite right, and the more I tried to walk with elegance, the more I tripped over myself. The day before the pageant, everything seemed to fall apart. Lucy had arranged a full dress rehearsal at home. Hair, makeup, everything. I stood in front of the mirror, trying to hold myself together. The gown I wore fit perfectly, but I still didn't recognize the person looking back at me. I felt so out of place, like a character in a costume that didn't belong. I pulled at my dress, fidgeting nervously as Lucy moved around me, adjusting my hair. She caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled softly. "You look beautiful, you know that?" I shook my head, unsure of myself. "I don't feel beautiful. I feel like a fraud." Lucy's smile faded slightly, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of concern in her eyes. "You're not a fraud, Emma. You're just scared. I know this is hard, but that's the whole point of this journey. You're learning to be confident in who you really are." But her words didn't seem to reach me. I felt myself growing smaller, swallowed by the gown, the makeup, the heels. I wanted to run, to scream, to find some escape from the pressure mounting in my chest. "What if I mess up tomorrow?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Lucy stepped closer, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. "Then you mess up. And you get back up again. That's what this is all about." But my mind was racing. I imagined the judges looking at me, unimpressed, my nerves getting the best of me. I imagined the audience laughing at me, seeing through the facade. What if I wasn't cut out for this? What if I wasn't meant to be the confident, poised woman I had been pretending to be? That night, I barely slept. The doubts weighed heavily on me, every possible worst-case scenario running through my head. I had no idea how I was going to pull it off, or if I even wanted to anymore. But in the quiet of the early morning, I stood in front of the mirror one last time. The girl in the reflection still looked foreign to me, someone I wasn't sure I could be. But then, as I stared at my reflection, something shifted. There was still that spark, that tiny flicker of potential beneath the surface. Maybe I wasn't perfect. Maybe I wasn't ready to be a beauty queen. But I was ready to try. Because I had already come this far, and there was no turning back. With one last deep breath, I fixed my makeup and smiled at myself. It wasn't the perfect, polished smile of a pageant queen, but it was my smile. And maybe that was enough for now. The moment I stepped onto the stage, the spotlight blinding my vision, everything around me seemed to disappear. The murmurs of the crowd faded. The distant applause turned to a soft echo in my ears. It was just me, alone in the spotlight, with nothing but my thoughts and the confidence, or lack thereof, that I'd built over the last few weeks. I had spent the morning in a whirlwind of last-minute preparations. Lucy had been there, guiding me every step of the way, helping with my hair, my makeup, reminding me to stand tall. But as I gazed into the mirror just before the event began, the girl looking back at me still felt like a stranger. The makeup was flawless, the gown fitted perfectly, but it was the fear in my eyes that gave me pause. I wanted to be someone else, someone confident, someone unshakable, but I wasn't sure I could be her. And yet, here I was. I took a step forward, the sound of my heels clicking on the stage floor louder than I expected. It was an unfamiliar sound, sharp, commanding, but it felt good. It felt like I was finally stepping into my own, leaving the doubts and the insecurities behind. I walked toward the judges' table, the fabric of my gown flowing behind me like a wave. The weight of the dress felt heavy at first, like a physical representation of the expectations I had placed on myself. But with each step, the weight began to lift until I wasn't just carrying it, I was wearing it. I straightened my posture, lifted my chin, and for the first time in a long while, I felt in control. The applause that followed my walk seemed like a dream. I wasn't sure what they were applauding, maybe my grace, maybe the transformation, but I could feel it, a rush of warmth flooding through me, washing away the doubts that had been holding me back. I wasn't the girl who had stumbled in the hallway or fidgeted in front of the mirror anymore. I was her now. The version of me I had tried so hard to hide was finally breaking through, and it felt freeing. Backstage, I could hear Lucy's voice, a whisper of pride that made my heart swell. "You did it, Em. I knew you could." But it wasn't just Lucy who had noticed. As I walked off stage, I saw the reactions from the others, those familiar faces in the audience. There were smiles, whispers of surprise and admiration. Even the skeptical girls who had mocked me before were staring in awe. I didn't need to hear their words to know that something had shifted.
Something had changed.
I made my way to the back, where Lucy was waiting with open arms. She pulled me into a tight hug, her voice full of pride and joy.
"See?
I told you, you're stunning." I looked at her, a mix of relief and joy bubbling inside me. I hadn't believed I could do it, but now, with the applause still ringing in my ears, I knew I had. I wasn't just pretending to be someone else. I was embracing the parts of me I had kept hidden. The beauty wasn't in the dress or the makeup. It was in the acceptance, the confidence, the feeling of stepping into my true self. For the first time in so long, I felt beautiful. Not because of the attention, not because of a title, but because I finally saw myself as I truly was, someone worthy of love, acceptance, and admiration. And as the night continued, I realized something even more important. I wasn't just living up to the expectations of others anymore. I was living for myself. I had discovered something deeper than beauty. I had found my strength. The final round of the pageant was upon me, and my heart was pounding so loudly in my chest that I could hear nothing else. I stood backstage, my hands trembling as I adjusted the layers of my dress. I could feel the heat of the spotlight just beyond the curtain, but I couldn't quite reach it. It was like there was an invisible wall separating me from everything I had worked so hard for. I had been walking confidently, smiling, and posing without a hitch all evening. But this was different. This was the final moment. The one where everything I had feared, every insecurity, every doubt I had pushed aside, would either consume me or propel me forward. It wasn't just about winning anymore, it was about proving to myself that I could do it. I could stand up here, as myself, with all my imperfections, my struggles, and my fears, and still be worthy of this moment. Still worthy of the love and acceptance I had sought my whole life. And yet, the fear kept bubbling up. What if I tripped? What if I wasn't good enough? What if they saw right through me and I failed? I looked at myself in the mirror, barely recognizing the person staring back. The makeup was flawless, my hair perfectly styled, but it was more than that. I was no longer just a girl in a gown. I was someone strong, someone brave enough to stand in front of an audience and share this part of myself. The girl who had been terrified of stepping out of her shell was no longer hiding. I was becoming me. As I waited for my cue to walk onto the stage, I heard a voice, soft but firm, coming from behind me. "Emma," Lucy said, stepping into my line of sight. Her smile was full of pride, but there was a deep understanding in her eyes. "You're ready?" I nodded, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. "What if I mess up?" Lucy gently cupped my face, her hands warm against my skin. "You won't. You're more than ready. Just trust yourself." Her words struck something deep inside of me. I had spent so long doubting myself, doubting my worth, but now I realized that this moment wasn't about perfection. It was about presence. It was about being unapologetically myself, no matter how messy or imperfect it felt. The curtain lifted, and I stepped onto the stage. The lights were blinding, but I didn't flinch. I walked forward, each step more confident than the last. The weight of the dress, the swish of the fabric against my legs, it all became part of me. I was no longer trying to be something, I was finally allowing myself to exist as I was. The crowd's murmurs faded as I reached the center of the stage. I stood still for a moment, letting the silence envelope me. There was a moment of pure vulnerability in that stillness. I could feel my heart racing, but it wasn't out of fear anymore. It was out of excitement. Excitement for what I had become, for what I had accomplished, for the person I had uncovered deep inside of me. And then I smiled. It was genuine. No longer the nervous, unsure smile I had been practicing for weeks. This smile was full of everything I had learned, everything I had fought for. It was the smile of someone who was no longer afraid to be seen. The applause came then, louder than before. Not because of my walk, not because of my looks, but because I had finally shown them the person I had always been inside, a person deserving of respect, of love, and of celebration. And as I stood there, basking in that overwhelming sense of acceptance, I realized something. I had already won. In that moment, all my fears and doubts melted away. I wasn't competing anymore. I wasn't trying to be someone else. I was simply being. The applause, the judges' smiles, the lights, they were all secondary. The true victory was in how I saw myself now, not as the awkward, self-conscious girl I had been before, but as a woman who had embraced her full potential. A woman who was whole. And with that, I felt a deep, cathartic release, a powerful emotional payoff. I had faced my fear and found the courage to rise above it. I was no longer the girl who doubted herself. I was the woman who believed in her worth. And that, more than anything, was the real prize. The pageant was over, but the transformation wasn't. I thought once the crown was off and the applause faded, I'd return to the old me, the insecure, unsure girl who still questioned her place in the world. But I realized something important the day after the competition. I didn't have to return to who I was before. I had learned, I had changed, and now I had the power to carry this version of myself into every aspect of my life. I started by embracing the confidence I had found in the spotlight and applying it to my everyday routine. I stopped hiding behind oversized clothes and deflecting compliments. I held my head high in public, walked with purpose, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone who was truly beautiful, not because of my makeup or my clothes, but because of the strength I now carried within me. My relationship with Lucy blossomed too. She had been my rock throughout this entire journey, and now, we were closer than ever. We laughed over coffee in the mornings, reminiscing about the pageant and the absurd moments backstage. But more than that, we talked openly about our dreams and aspirations. Lucy was always so confident, so sure of herself. But now, she seemed even more inspired by the person I was becoming. At work, I no longer shrank away from leadership opportunities or the spotlight. I spoke up in meetings, no longer second-guessing my voice. The self-doubt that had always been my silent companion seemed to fade, replaced by a quiet, growing belief that I had something worthwhile to offer. My colleagues noticed, too. They started seeking my advice, acknowledging my contributions, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in who I had become. Even with my family, things shifted. My parents, who had always been supportive but distant, began to see me in a new light. I no longer felt like I was living in their shadow or trying to meet their expectations. Instead, I was carving my own path, making my own decisions. When I spoke about my plans for the future, my voice was steady and sure. They saw me now not just as their daughter, but as a woman with her own agency and dreams. In the end, it wasn't about winning a title or proving anyone wrong. It was about proving something to myself, that I could change, that I could be more than I had ever imagined. As I stood in front of my mirror that evening, no longer the girl who doubted herself, I smiled. I had arrived at the place I'd always longed to be, content, confident, and at peace with who I was. The crown, the applause, the recognition, they were fleeting. But this feeling of being truly myself was forever. The journey from doubt to confidence is never easy, but it is always worth it. We all have the power to uncover parts of ourselves we never thought possible, to transform in ways that bring us closer to our true essence. The key lies in embracing vulnerability, trusting the process, and allowing ourselves the grace to grow. It's not about fitting into someone else's mold, but about stepping into our own, unashamed and unapologetic. The beauty of transformation is not just in how we look, but in how we learn to love who we are, flaws, imperfections, and all. Remember, the most powerful thing you can do is accept yourself fully. Only then can you truly shine in the world, confident and free.